Monica, 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 Rial. Monica is my guest on this Kirblog. How'd I do? I had like
You
two
did a
hours to
great
prepare for
job.
that. As soon as I was like, "What's your favorite song?" This. Oh, it's perfect. It sounds like her name. Oh, this is gonna be hard. I have to make this work in like 5 seconds. I did okay. I'm
I
proud of
wasn't sure
myself.
what you were gonna do with it, but that's awesome. Now I kind of want that song as like a whole track,
Well, I mean, we'll talk after. Well,
right?
welcome
That was
everybody.
awesome.
Welcome everybody to Voice October 2018, where I interview various veterans of the voiceover world. I swear to God, I could spend this entire hour going over this lovely lady's 400 plus credits. I think she's Sakura on Cardcaptor, she's Suyu in My Hero, she's May Chang in FMA, she's Toshiki in One Piece, she's in virtually every anime ever in existence. She's in Fire Emblem, she's in Tales of Berseria, she's in Smite, she was in Aqua Teen Hunger Force. And also she's been Bulma on some really obscure show called Dragon Ball in the last like 8 years or so.
Yeah, no
Please,
big.
please welcome Monica Rial. Hi, thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. That was awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
lovely.
it's a lot. Now you know how I feel. I used to do like panels where I would just go through like, here's everything I've been in and read through the list, and I can't even do it anymore. It's too
Now you're just telling them, it's like, just Google me, BTVA me, Wiki me. I don't care. Just redo your homework, please, so we can get to
right.
the real panel.
Well, I always feel like a jerk when people come up and they're like, "Hey, what have you been in?" And I'm like, "What have you seen?" Because that's gonna be easier.
I've probably been in it, which is that's the nice thing when you realize that all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's a little weird though because you sound like such a tool when you're like, "What have you seen?" Because I might be in it. What?
Well,
So,
I gotta say I'm actually mildly embarrassed to admit that for Voice October you've been my first voice actress guest in a long time.
woohoo!
Yeah, I'm not ashamed to say that I have you because I was thinking about, okay, who's my Texas guest going to be? Generally, what I do every year is I get somebody from every major territory throughout the
Oh,
month, and
that's
I have
smart.
different folks. So I've had in Teja, I've had Mr. McFarland, I've had Mr. Bevins, but
Hmm.
forget them. I mean, whatever. They're no big deal. But
Those dudes, whatever.
but I mean, and you also have been doing this for a long time. You've done so many things, and actually, this is exciting because I'm technically getting a bit of a new territory with you because you were my first Houston guest as well.
Oh, yay!
Yeah.
Fun.
So I want to learn a little bit about that. But okay, let me get the generic. Speaking of convention panels, I'm sure you've answered this 8 million times in the last several decades. Give us the short, sweet version of how did you get into this business, your acting background, blah blah blah, the usual stuff that I'm sure people probably already know. But just for me,
Just
just
in
for me.
case.
Yes.
Just in case. Well, I was a ballerina growing up and I loved it. And then I hurt my knee when I was about 12, which means that you can't be a prima ballerina if you've got torn ligaments in your knee. So I started looking at other things that I enjoyed. And one of the things that I know I enjoyed performing and I knew I enjoyed being on stage, but I didn't know where to go from there. And I kind of took my dance background and went into musical theater and theater and started taking classes. So when I was fifth grade, sixth grade is about when I really started. I took classes outside of school. I did a little touring company thing for a while where, I got pulled out of middle school to go do these plays for high school students, and they were all like after school special kind of things, like, tell me it's going to be wonderful about teenage pregnancy and not me about teenage drug use. But I thought I was the shit because I would get pulled out of class. We'd have to drive to somewhere, Dallas, Austin, wherever. I would do the performance with people that were much older than me, and then we'd have to stay in character and so that the people could ask us questions. So, I was 12. I didn't know what a big improv thing that is. So I would sit there as in my character and answer these questions for these high school kids. So I thought I was just like hot shit. I thought I was the coolest kid in town. Then I went to high school and continued to study theater. Did a lot of theater outside of my high school. as well as in school. Then went to the University of Houston, studied theater there with Dr. Sidney Berger, Jose Quintero, Carolyn Boone, all these really, really great people. To this day, I continue to take classes. But while I was at the University of Houston, I met a gentleman named Jason Douglas, who is also another voice actor. And he's like, hey, I'm doing this thing and you should audition. And I was like, what? Here in Houston, they dub things? Like, seriously? And I knew what anime was because my brother was a huge fan. I was like, but they do all that now in LA? Like, this doesn't happen in Texas. He's like, no, seriously, it does. And you should go audition because you sound like a child. I was like, thanks, I think. And so it was this weird situation where he gave me the number and I called. And this is way back in the day before anybody really, really wanted to be a voice actor. So I called and I was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, but I was told to call this number to audition. And they were like, yeah, we're having auditions this weekend here at ADV Films. You should totally come in. I'm like, okay. I didn't realize how weird it was because they only have like open call auditions like at that time once a year, once every 2 years. So I went in that weekend and I auditioned to a little segment of Bubblegum Crisis 2040, where they had their helmets on, like they're all on motorcycles and stuff, and they had their helmets on. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I could totally get into this. And then they didn't call me for like 3 months. So I thought I totally ruined it. I was like, oh, there's no way. And then Matt Greenfield called me in to do Walla, with all actors and do all the background noises. And he kind of tested me with like hey, be a little boy. Okay, now be a German grandma. Okay, now be a Spanish grandpa. Okay, now be this old lady. Now be this young lady. Now be this angry young lady. And it was like just seeing if I could keep up with them. And then after that, I was cast in Gasaraki and Generator Gall. And then here we are 20 years later.
20
and
years. My God. Oh, God, don't
isn't
tell
it
me that.
crazy? Yeah, it's insane because it's like, you don't realize. I mean, I guess they say, time flies when you're having fun, and it is 100% true because I cannot believe it's been that long. Like, people bring Excel Saga to me, and they're like, "Yeah, I love the classics," and I'm like, "That's a classic."
It is now. Yeah,
It
yeah.
is
God. Oh,
now.
man, I forgot about Excel Saga. Good Lord. Oh, man.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Well, okay, so you started late 90s, I guess that would have been then at ADV, right?
Yes.
Okay,
I was
okay.
it was 99. Yeah. So actually my 20-year anniversary will be Valentine's Day 2019.
Oh my
So,
gosh,
isn't
wow.
it cute?
My
Yeah, it's so
God.
cute.
So of course I know you were not of like the very very first kind of group of folks that were starting at ADV, but
Right.
you were pretty early on, and even before because before we get to the Funimation stuff, which of course is a lot of what people know you for now, but
Right.
for like many years, like you were doing like every show, in Houston.
Oh yeah.
So like having worked with all these guys, like I'm actually curious about kind of the origin point of that because I maybe I could be wrong about this. I'm not sure. Like they were doing stuff I think before Funimation was doing. They moved DBZ to Dallas, so before there was even like an anime scene there. ADV was like they were the anime central of Texas at the time. Is that right? I think.
Oh, 100%. Because at that point, Dragon Ball was the big thing that Funimation was doing, and so we all kind of were like, well, I mean, they're doing anime, but they're doing Yu Yu Hakusho and Dragon Ball because that's really all they had done at that point.
Hmm.
So I think ADV didn't even consider Funimation as a competitor because we're like, oh, they do those long running, one shows. Of course, I knew it. My yard men are here, right? As is always
It's okay. No,
happens.
they'll never be able to hear it. They'll never know. Just lie.
So if it gets a little crazy in the background, that's why.
So it's okay.
Just figures.
It's ambiance. It's ambiance. It's all good.
It's just so funny to me because, like, it's never when I'm sitting here alone doing nothing. It's always when I'm on the phone or trying to film or doing something that they're like, "Hey, Monica, what's up?" I'm like, "Don't."
Everybody out there now, you know the plights of all voice actors that have to do things from home now. Carry on.
Well, and I got people on Twitter too that were like, "Don't you have a soundproof booth?" And I'm like, "You guys, you can only do so much when it's like a whole onslaught of
Yeah,
mowers and
yeah.
weed eaters." And like, ugh.
Even in real
Okay,
studios, sometimes we have to stop for when planes come over. Sorry, carry on.
Oh no, it's true. Yeah, at Funimation we had the yard guys there the other day, and we had to stop. Even I was in a whisper room inside studio.
Life
You still had
sucks.
to stop. But yeah. So basically, we didn't. I think back then Funimation wasn't considered a huge competitor. ADV had started off way before I did. You know, they did Evangelion and all that kind of stuff. And then I think when I came along, like Vic Mignogna and I started at the same time, and there was a whole group of actors. Chris Patton started right before me. Greg Ayers came in a little bit after me, but we all kind of started in that time period because they really grew quickly and they needed a lot of actors. And it kind of became like a repertory company just because you had there was such a demand and you had this pool of actors that at the time was pretty small and it grew over the years, but even still you only had so many people to choose from for each show, so you'd try to like rotate as much as you could. And that's really, I think, why you see people like me and Lucy Christian and John Swayze with these ridiculous resumes, is because we were at ADV when it was like, okay, who's here? Okay, we've got 13 studios or 14 studios or whatever ridiculousness they had at the time. Because it was crazy. It was just a hallway, a long
Wow.
hallway of studios.
Wait, hold on.
And they,
So ADV back then, it's like what, 2000s or whatever. Like they had that many
ooh,
facilities going on.
well, actually, when I started, there was one studio. There was
Okay.
one individual studio back in 1999 when I started, and it had two booths in the one studio so that you could record together. In fact, I think they had done Cutie Honey and a couple of other shows where they had tried to record people together.
Okay.
After that, they added a second studio, which is where we did Excel Saga and a couple of the shows. But then after that, that's when the explosion happened, and they built, gosh, how many was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I guess it wasn't 13, 14. It was like 10, 11
Still, I mean, it's
studios.
like my God, like that's a
It's a
lot, like
lot.
going on at the same time. And these
And
are
some of
all
them,
going at the same time, like recording stuff, like all at once. I'm assuming, or
yeah, like they're
wow.
all, each studio was recording a different show, and they would just record a show and finish it and put it out, and then start on the next one and put it out. And so we had a team of directors that were full time, and yeah, you just kind of bounced around. And if you happen to be at the studio and they needed, you know, 3 different bit parts on this show and 10 different bit parts on that show, well, then you better get in there and you better figure out how to make yourself sound like 3 different people or 10 different people. So I feel like I really learned a whole lot in those days at ADV because it grew so quickly and we had to grow with it. Like there was no time to like study up and try to read up on your accents or anything. It was just literally get in there, sound like a different person, have this accent, whatever we need you to do, you're going to have to do it and do it now.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
was crazy.
And I know obviously Matt Greenfield was, you know, kind of the head honcho there.
Hmm.
Who were some of the other people? Because I've seen like a pretty decent handful of ADV shows, but this was back before I was like really researching like everybody who would do, you know, beyond just the cast or whatever. So who were like was Chris Ayres directing at that point too, or like who were some of the usual people?
No, Chris, I don't think Chris did a lot of directing back then. He started more when it was Sentai, which is kind of
Okay,
its current revelation.
right.
Back then, it was Matt Greenfield, Stephen Foster, who's probably most notoriously known for Ghost Stories, the Ghost
Okay,
Stories
of
dub.
course. Uh huh.
There was Jin Ho Chung, Kyle Jones,
Oh yes, of course.
who's directed a lot. Scott McLennan, Don Rush, who directed Full Metal Panic and Azumanga Daioh and quite a few things. There was Sandra. I can't remember Sandra's last name right now, but Sandra. There were a bunch of people that kind of came and went. Um, but yeah, those were like the main people that I can remember off the top of my head. We had a couple of other people that would like come in and do a thing and then leave, and or they'd stick around for a few months and then go. But that was like the main squad, those
Okay.
guys.
I mean, yeah, it sounded like anime boot camp with just like how many things happening all at once. Because I mean, you know, around that, I mean, just the people you mentioned with, you know, Patton and Greg and you know, Jason Douglas and Swayze, all these people. I remember like when I was just hearing you guys. I mean, I'm just still hearing you guys a lot in many, many, many things, but like you guys were like the people in absolutely everything as like the
Right.
leads in so many shows. And then also around that era, because that was, I think it would have been like early to mid 2000s when first FMA was happening. And that was kind of the era
Right.
when you guys were getting, snatched up by some of the funny people around that point in time. So kind of, I'm curious also because you guys were that you listed before were kind of among the first that were doing that too. Kind of, how did that come about?
Well, it was interesting because, when they did Fruits Basket, when Funny did Fruits Basket, that was the first time that everybody at ADV went, oh, they can do things that aren't dudes fighting. That's cool. So, hey, maybe this is another opportunity. And then Vic actually was the first one to go work for Funimation. And then for me, it was a weird situation. Like, I went to one of my first conventions that I went to. Mike McFarland was there, and they were about to announce who got the rights to Kitty Grade, which was a Gonzo show. And I really, really loved Kitty Grade. I didn't know much about it, but I loved the designs. I loved Lumiere. And I was like, oh, gosh, I really want to do the show. And ADV is totally going to get it because we are super buddy-buddy with Gonzo. I know we're going to get it. It's going to be awesome. And then they announced that Funimation got it. And I was like, what? Excuse me? Oh, no, 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 no. Wait, this is not how this is supposed to work. Like, wait a minute. Wait, so this one show they did, all of a sudden they're going to start doing regular anime too. And so I was talking to Mike McFarland. He's like, well, I mean, would you be interested in going to Dallas, like, and auditioning for it? And I was like, yeah, I want to work on this show. I will totally come to Dallas. And then flash forward, like, I think it was like 6 or 8 months because that's how it worked back then. Tara, the or maybe it wasn't Tara, whoever the talent coordinator was way back when, was like, hi, I need to book you for 8 hours for Kitty Grade. And I was like, excuse me? Apparently, Mike McFarland went to Justin Cook and gave him Excel Saga.
Wow.
I was like, the girl that plays Hyatt in this wants to be in Kitty Grade. And so Justin cast me off of Excel Saga.
Wow.
As
Oh my
Lumiere.
God.
And I came up to work, and the first thing he said to me, like the first thing out of his mouth, I was like, hello, Mr. Cook. My name is Monica Rial, and I'm so excited to be working with you. And he goes, oh my God, you really sound like that. I was like, yeah, this is my real voice. But then that happened, and so I started going up more often, and then they would be like, hey, we want to get some fresh blood up here. Do you know anybody who'd be willing to travel? And then it was like, hey, I know this girl, Lucy Christian. She's really awesome. Or, hey, I know this guy, Chris Patton. You should totally bring him up. And so slowly but surely, we started going up there. Some of them started coming down here. And it kind of became just this more a fluid group as opposed to, oh, well, you work for ADV and you work for Funimation. It was more just like the Texas people.
Right.
Because you didn't know where we were going to pop up. But yeah, those were fun times too. Because like we got a ton of work at ADV, but then we also had a ton of work at Funimation. So, you'd do all your ADV stuff and then drive up to Funimation and spend 3 12-hour days in a in a whisper room in Dallas, and then drive home and do the same thing back at home. So it was a lot, but
Oh yeah,
it was fun.
and actually, I want to talk about that for just a second too, because I don't think I've ever gone over that with Mike or Bevins, even though they have been to Houston as well. But I mean, by this point, I have to imagine it's just like, well, actually, you're in Dallas now, though? I think, right? You're not in Houston
Yes,
anymore. Okay,
I'm in Dallas now.
Okay, but I mean, like and even the people that are still living there and coming back and forth. I mean, it's got to be murder, like, because it's what, like a 3 to 4 hour drive, like back and forth between those two areas.
Yeah, it's 4 hours of nothing.
Yeah. Oh, God almighty. I can't, I've never thought to even ask this to any of you guys before, but like, I mean, truly, because the last like 10 years or so, maybe 15 at this point, because like FMA was kind of like I feel the big show where like, okay, this is like practically half Dallas, half Houston people, like in terms of all the major characters and stuff. And but I'm really curious, like what did you guys? I mean, I don't know if you could speak for anybody else, but at least for yourself, what would you guys do on that commute so often, going back and forth when you had to so often back then? Like seriously. Like, I'm really
Well,
curious.
we know every single, like, I can't speak for everyone, but in my case, I know every single like town, like major town
Uh-huh.
between here and there. I also know like back roads. So like if I know there's going to be some traffic on 45, which is the main thoroughfare between here and there, then I know how to take like the back roads and take a little longer but scenic route. But usually it was just like, okay, you need to get through Corsicana very slowly because it's usually a speed trap. You know that if you get to Centerville, which is literally the center between Dallas and Houston. But Centerville is a great place to stop. They've got really great Texas barbecue and jerky and pickled stuff. And so you go shopping, you go to Woody's in Centerville, and you stop and you eat some barbecue and get on the road. There's now a Buc-ee's, which is a more recent thing. And Buc-ee's is this huge kind of like truck stop, but it's kind of ridiculous and ornate and crazy. They've got their own mascots and stuff. But yeah, there's little things to do along the way. You stop in Corsicana, there's a place called Collins Street Bakery that's really, really great. But yeah, it used to be that I would take my time and like stop here, stop there, maybe stop at this little boutique, stop at that little place. Now I'm like, I will use the restroom and fill up my tank, get in my car, and drive straight there.
I imagine you've had to have gone through like a podcast or two, or like a billion albums of music or something, in all these years by now.
Oh, definitely. Like if there's any new albums you want to hear, you make sure you've got those downloaded or whatever right before you leave. If you've got any podcasts you need to catch up on, same thing. So yeah, there's a lot of, back in the day it was the books on tape. You'd put the tape player in there and listen to a book on the way or back. Or for me, I get really sleepy, so I sing most of the way. So I'd bring all my musical stuff and then just be that
Nice.
crazy lady that sings all the way between Houston and
See, if I had that kind of commute, I would absolutely be listening to audiobooks, and then I'd be like, and then knowing me, I'd be like, oh, it's so and so. I know who this person is because
right.
especially with the New York guys. But yeah,
Yeah.
So you've been in Dallas now, and I mean you've done so much stuff for Funimation at this point, and even actually, and I apologize if I'm not remembering every detail of this, but I know you've adapted scripts, and also, did you do some directing there for a little while too? I think
I did, yeah.
Okay.
When I first moved up here, I was actually in training with ADV to become one of their directors, and
Okay.
then things kind of went south um, for poor old ADV. Oh gosh, these guys are so loud.
It's okay. Ambiance. Don't worry about
Right?
it. Send it out.
uh, but and the worst part is that they're all smiling and waving because I have a whole bunch of windows in my house. So like, hi. I'm like, hi. You're just a bit of a distraction. But yeah, when I was with ADV right before everything kind of tanked, I was studying to be a director and learning out how all of that was going to work. And then when I came up to Funimation, it was kind of a last minute deal. I was like, hey, I really need to do something. Like, this is not cool. I'm running out of savings. What's going on? And so Colleen Klinkenbeard was like, hey, if you can come up here like now, I can give you a director position. And so there was a period of time where I actually lived in Houston, but I would drive up to Dallas and work Monday through Friday directing, and then I would drive home on the weekend and pack all of my stuff, knowing like, hey, I'm gonna have to move to Dallas. So that was weird, but I really enjoyed directing. But I would say that like adapting has always been something that I have done. I don't do it any longer, but I really enjoyed it. The acting has always been number one, though. Like that's always been my passion, my number one thing that I want to do the most of.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Well, I mean, also because it's the easiest.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I think because I recall. Did you write for like Soul Eater and like some other stuff? I'm trying to remember.
It wasn't Soul Eater. I started way, way back on a show called D and Angel.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
At ADV, and then I worked all the way through for Funimation. Though some of the ones that I've worked on, or on High School Host Club, which I wrote under a pseudonym, and God, there's so many I can't even. Like I'm sitting here going, what else did I write? There's so much. Bento, Tokyo Ghoul.
Oh yeah.
Gosh, there one Fairy Tale. So much Fairy Tale.
Oh,
A few.
Fairy Tale's a sweet gig because that's the show that never ends, apparently.
Right. Well, I finally, after a while, I was like, I think it was 3 or 4 years that I had been the lead writer on Fairy Tale, and I was finally like, I love this show, but can I do something else? Because I feel like now everybody's got a really good handle on what this show is about, and I love these characters, but oh my word, please just let me look at anything else. And
Oh
so they gave
yeah.
me Tokyo Ghoul.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, sweet, I'll do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, even like with One Piece, it's like, my God, like there's been like I think 8 different people that have even just directed the show at this point.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just so much.
Yeah.
There's so many episodes.
Well, now, of course, things are very different around the parts of Teja with, the broadcast dubs and everything. And I mean, talking about, 14 studios. I mean, for those of you who don't know, if you've never seen any, like, behind-the-scenes stuff with any Funimation shows or anything, I mean, they literally have, I think 15 to 16 different booths
I think
happening.
it's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I think it's 10 now.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, 10 going on, and then they have a day and a night shift. So there's all these people, working at all hours of the day, people sometimes sleeping under desks occasionally.
Right.
Oh, Lord. I mean, so now, I mean, I maybe not even just for you necessarily, what is a day in the life like for anybody who works consistently at Funimation now?
Well, it's so weird because, I mean, that's the thing that's so strange about our jobs is we're all freelancers. So it's like we make our own schedules, which sounds great, except that also changes every 3 months now because now that we're in sync with Japanese television scheduling, every time they have a new season, we have a new season, which means everything that you've been doing gets completely scrapped and your whole schedule changes every 3 months, which can be either exciting or daunting depending on how you choose to look at it. I try to keep it exciting, but sometimes it gets a little crazy. So it depends on your season. So like right now I have a lighter season, which means I don't have as much that I'm doing. I'm still in quite a few shows, but they're not as talk heavy. They're not like the main player in the game. So like I was at Funimation yesterday. We had to film a video commentary, and then I had about 3 hours worth of my own voice work. But that's not including like the commercial sessions and all of the Dragon Ball stuff that's done at Okratron and all of the convention scheduling and all of the other gigs that you get outside of agents and all of that other stuff. So, but yeah, that was it for yesterday. Today, I don't go into the studio. Tomorrow, I do. I don't remember what time. I've got it written down on my calendar. And I think on Friday as well. But next season, I've got a lot of shows coming back. I've got a lot of bigger characters coming through. So, any season you can go from working like maybe 15 to 20 hours a week to working 2 or 30 minutes a week. Like for a show like My Hero, people are always like, oh, Suyu's awesome. I'm like, Suyu is awesome. But I get like maybe 15 minutes in the booth every week for Suyu.
Yeah.
Like that's it. It's usually just you go in, you say Ribbit, and then you leave. And it's like, all right.
And you can do her even when you're sick and have a cold.
Exactly, because this voice is awesome.
I love her so.
She's so cute.
She's my favorite. Don't tell anybody.
Thank you. I won't tell them. She's my favorite too, for obvious reasons.
Well, of course. Yeah, no, it's funny. I do think about it. Unless you're like Briner or poor Cliff, who just has to scream for hours. I mean, like everybody, all the other classmates seem like they come in like, okay, what's going on, guys? Okay, you're done. Bye, go home. Unless it's an episode about like you get an episode about your character having an internship because she's so beloved, which is nice.
Right, which is awesome. Yeah. But that was the one time, and it's so weird because, like, we were all talking to each other like, well, is my character popular? Well, your character's popular. Why are our characters popular? We don't talk.
Yeah.
And then figuring it out that, like, when you watch it, oh, I guess Sue does have more lines than some of the people. You just don't realize it because you're only in there for 10 minutes at a time. And I guess that's what's so weird about this new simuldub situation is that, back in the day, they'd wait until they had like 6 episodes, 12 episodes. So they'd call you in and be like, okay, we're going to need you for 6 hours for all 12 episodes. Mm-hmm. So you'd come in and do it all at one time. But that's what's so weird about it being weekly is that then that 6 hours is distributed over all of that time. And it's like, okay, one week it might be 30 minutes, one week it's an hour, one week it's, hey, can you stop by the studio because you have one ribbit?
One whole ribbon. Well,
Since you're already here.
it's interesting too because like, often I compare it. I forget. Did you ever do like a Pokemon episode? Like, did you ever go to visit New York and do anything there?
No, I haven't done any Pokemon,
Oh,
which I would love to do at some point. I know that I've been sent auditions, but it never worked out because it was always like, oh, I'm going to, I think one of the times I was going to a convention in the UK and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not going to work. Oops,
yeah,
I'd love to.
yeah,
Hopefully
yeah.
someday. I'd love to be a Pokemon just because.
Yeah, I mean, literally, from what I understand, if you're in town, you hit up Lisa, and if you're somebody that's done shit before, then they're like, "I'll throw you an episode or whatever."
Right?
I mean,
Ooh, maybe I
someday.
need to hit her up.
Hey, yeah, yeah. Yeah, she's been doing it the last few years, but the reason I bring that up is because I always kind of liken the broadcast dub sort of deal to similarly what they have to do with Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh in New York, where like. I mean, they would just get a new episode every week, and everybody has to come in for just the one episode. They do that. Sometimes if they'd have a couple ahead of time, they could maybe do a few more, but like it would be shorter bursts. It wouldn't be like, okay, we got like this full season of episodes, so we can make a full day out of recording like 13 or
Right.
however many. And like in some ways it's cool because it's consistent, especially if you're doing like shows that are very ongoing and long running, and you're always going to have something to come back to. That's nice. But
Right.
if it's only for short bursts at a time, it's like, well, this isn't going to pay my rent. So,
Exactly. And I think that's what's hard too, because like a lot of people that want to be voice actors, they assume, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be a voice actor. I'm going to be able to pay all of my bills. And it's like, well, here's the thing. I mean, you can as a voice actor, but as an anime voice actor specifically, like you'd have to be a really large role in every single show.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's just not going to happen. Like before, when we would do big chunks at a time, it's like, oh, okay, well, hey, I'm getting paid for 24 hours to do this, 12 episode show. Sweet. That's a pretty good chunk of change. But now, yeah, with it's like 1 hour, 3 hours, an hour and a
good.
half.
Goodbye. Okay, goodbye. See you next week. Maybe if you're not dead or what. Yeah, then the case
Right.
of when your character dies, and it's like, well, all right.
Exactly.
Oh
It's
Lord.
so different. And I mean, I guess acclimating to it has been a little hard. Now it's easier, but it's still hard because it's like, okay, well, you've got your other stuff that you have to juggle around it. And you never know from week to week if you're going to have like, what if your character has a really heavy episode? Well, then all of a sudden you might have, 16 hours that you need for one episode or two episodes. Well, that completely changes your week than when you're doing, 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of difficult figuring all that out.
Well, now for we've reached the halfway point or so. I don't actually spend too much time on this, but I mean, you have done just so many goddamn shoys. I feel like it would be a disservice for the people listening if I didn't talk about some of them specifically. I mean, to start with, like in the heyday of ADV, I mean, some of the big ones, Excel World. I feel like an idiot for completely forgetting Excel World. The show is brilliant. Azumanga, which I
Yay!
adored. Very much so. Watched that in college and loved it.
It's one of my favorites.
Any, I guess, like, I mean, I know obviously this is going back many years, but any particular like fun stories or anything about some of those shows from that era that like you have any funny memories about or anything to
Oh
share?
yeah. I mean, like I think back in that period what I remember most is like I worked with Stephen Foster and Matt Greenfield a lot in two totally different respects. Stephen did a lot of comedy, obviously with ghost stories. And that was one of my favorite memories working at ADV was working on ghost stories because back then we didn't know it was going to become this huge cult classic kind of thing. We just thought, hey, we're going to make this stupid dub and it's going to be fun for us. And we don't care if nobody watches it, it'll be great. And when it came out, people hated us for it because it was not we were like, hey, you get like the Japanese with subtitles pure, or you can watch this crazy ass dub. And everybody's like, how dare you change the Japanese? And we're like, we didn't. We didn't change the Japanese. We gave you a crazy ass dub. And everybody's like, we hate you for this. I'm like, but okay. So it's funny all these years later that all of a sudden it's like this beloved thing, and I can't go to a convention anywhere in the world without it being one of the first questions. Like, hey, can you tell us about ghost stories? So that was a lot of fun. And working with Matt Greenfield is probably some of my favorite memories from ADV because he's the one who really taught me how to voice act.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was an actor, but coming from stage to behind a microphone is really, really difficult. And it's a completely different set of skills. And so he really, really, really helped me kind of grow and change from a stage actor to a voice actor. And working with him on shows like Noir and Razafon and Corral
Oh
Phantom
my god, I
Memory and
forgot about Razafon. I saw that on
oh
like,
my
what the hell
gosh.
was that? It was like Sci-Fi Channel or something like that. I remember seeing that years
Yeah.
ago. I was like, oh, this one.
Yeah, I mean, his shows were just so well done. He got so into it, and I had so much fun working with him, even though sometimes he would drive me crazy. Um, those were my favorites. There was one story of Jin that makes me laugh. Jin Ho Chung was just the nicest dude ever. Um, he still is just a totally, totally sweet dude. He doesn't work in anime anymore, but I'm still friends with him on all the social medias. But he'd probably hate me for telling this story, but I thought it was hilarious.
Oh boy.
Um, it was for the show Mezzo, where Lucy plays the main character and I play, one of the people that's trying to mess her up because, why not? And I forget what the line was, but he was trying to give me direction and he's not an actor. So he was always very careful about the direction he would give and very serious. So all I know is that the line ended with the word me. It was something about, like, what are you trying to do to me or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, hey, Monica, could you go down on me? And I went, excuse me? And I started laughing. And he goes, oh my God. And I have never seen an Asian man turn so red. He turned bright red. He's like, oh my God. Oh, and I was like, Jen, I know, I'm totally just messing with you. But the engineer was on the floor. So funny because he was so serious. He was trying so hard to it was a very serious scene, and I totally blew it for him. I was like, this is the best direction ever. He's like, no, that's not what I meant. Like, I know.
See, but he's not the one of the booth, so it wasn't recorded for everyone to hear forever.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, we had lots of fun moments. We did we did the Super Milk Chan show that was on
Yes.
air for a while.
You
And
dumbass.
yeah, we recorded all of these. Like, if you ever find any of those Super Milk Chan discs, I don't think they're in print anymore, but like you can find them at half price books every once in a while. There are live action scenes that we filmed in between each where we played ourselves, but like these really weird characterizations of ourselves. And the more that we did, the farther away from ourselves that it actually went. So like there's one where I lock me and Shelley Kayleen and Hillary Haig in a studio and give them ecstasy or something. I don't know, but it was like,
oh my God.
there's such weird things. And every once in a while, somebody will pop up with, hey, look what I found. I'm like, oh, those.
I forgot about that. I tried to block those out.
Yeah, they were fun to film, but oh man, they're like the ghost of Christmas past that comes up every once in a while. And you're like, nope, how about nope?
See, it's interesting because Super Milk Chan and Ghost Stories. Now, I've never actually heard this from somebody who worked on it before. Was the story of Ghost Stories that like the Japanese licensor was like, hey, this show like bombed really hard in Japan, so do whatever you want with it, and then that was the freedom to like, okay, let's just make it like a comedy dub or whatever. Is that what happened with it, or?
Pretty much. I mean, like from what we understood is that it did not do well. Like they were even taking it off the shelves, and it's not that it was a bad show. It just wasn't. It was very Scooby-Doo. It wasn't anything new. And I think at that time in particular, it was when anime was really starting to flood the market.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it wasn't a decent show, people just weren't going to buy it. And so in Japan, and it kind of came, I think, if I remember correctly, what happens a lot in the anime industry still is if you're interested in like super big title, A plus, ninja show over here, well, sometimes what the anime companies will do is they'll say, hey, we'll give you the license to that show, but you also have to take these other 3 shows that nobody wants.
Okay, yeah.
So I think it might have been one of those situations where we got the big show and then we got all these other little shows and they were like, please just do whatever you can. But that one in particular, I know that they were really concerned about the studio itself, like something, like the studio going under or whatever. And so I don't know who did all of the checking to make sure it was cool, but I would assume that was Steven and our translators. But yeah, it literally came back with Steven had this idea of like, hey, what if we did this really like ridiculous dub and we still release the Japanese subs, so everybody can watch the original, but then we give it this really crazy dub.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody at ADV was like, yeah, let's try it. And so like we kept the names of the characters and that's kind of it.
And then was with it's been a long time since I've seen Super Milk Chen. I remember that was on Adult Swim for a little while, but was that a case where maybe I'm totally remembering this wrong? Did you guys do like 2 different dubs of the show?
Yes, we did. And in fact, the bad one, I mean, well, there was 2 different versions because it happened after Ghost Stories. And so everybody was like really kind of worried about the fandom, like sending us death threats and bomb threats again, which we didn't really want. So what Steven decided to do with that one is because Super Milk was so full of like really time sensitive jokes, like time sensitive to Japan jokes,
right.
like jokes about their foreign minister and jokes about their politics and things that most Americans just would not understand.
Yeah.
He decided, okay, we're going to do one that is strictly the translation, like just verbatim whatever is being said. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to do one that's going to be the funny one. And for whatever reason, I think it was MTV and Adult Swim picked up the literal translation one.
Really?
Or I think one of them picked up the good one and one of them picked up the bad one. Anyway, so for Tetsuko, the robot, like the Super Milk was Hillary in both, but for Tetsuko, the robot, I was in the closest to the Japanese dub because I sounded more like the VA or the Seiyu who did it in Japan. But then for the funny dub, Tetsuko was voiced by Marcy Banner, who made her sound like a raging alcoholic that smokes 8 packs a day.
Oh my God. Oh, wow.
So it was completely different, even the 2 characters, which was really interesting working on it. But I think if I recall correctly, like for whatever reason, my version was the one that was on television, and I felt awful because I was like, "Marcy's is so funny.
Yeah, no,
you should totally watch her version."
Yeah, because I actually, now that I realize that, I think I have only seen that one because I do remember specifically seeing the one where you were Tetsuko.
Yeah, and it's not as funny because it's like we didn't even understand. Like we would look at the script and we're like, "Who are these people?" And Steven's like, "I don't know, but we're making the fans happy."
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially, God, what a time to be alive when, like, hey, we have the time and budget to actually do something like that in the first place. Like, my God.
Yeah, that's not even a thing that would exist today, like ever. But I'm so glad that we got to do. The funny one is so worth it if you can find it.
Yeah, no, I'll have to look that up. There was a show that I worked on, I think a year or 2 ago. It was called World War Blue, and like a similar kind of thing where like it did not do well in Japan. It was a great concept. It was like the video game console wars as an anime, and all the characters like these kind of Fire Emblem-y looking kind of pretty boy characters and whatever. But they were
cool.
They were all based on like game franchises. But it was 3 episodes, and then it just like super tanked. And originally I was like, okay, can we Shin-chan it? Can we like make it like a funny, kind of parody dub or whatever? But it was a case where, and I do not blame them whatsoever because this is perfectly within their right. But the Japanese company was like, we'd rather you stick to what the story is and not go that. But I went the halfway point because I that was the one anime that I've ever adapted. I was like, okay, I'm going to stick to the story, but I'm going to make literally every other line of dialogue either a quote from some video game, some kind of Nintendo or Sega marketing quote, just some kind of reference to something video game, and I got away. So it was kind of that fine line sort of thing where like it worked out okay, and I was like, yes, okay.
I think it's just stuff that's lost in translation. Like I think that they don't understand that like, hey, we're not like crapping on what you've created. Like we think what you've created is great. But we also know that Japanese audiences and Western audiences are totally different. So I've done the same thing as an adapter. There's a show called Senran Kagura, that's based off a video game, but the narrator in the show was always just, a narrator. He's like, this is what's happening, and I'm telling you exactly what's happening on the screen. Woo! And I was like, wouldn't it be funny if he was a perv? Because, like, the whole show is, like, girls and their boobs bouncing everywhere. I was like, well, if we're going to do this, like, tongue-in-cheek thing, what if we just slightly change it so that he's a perv? And so I took a shot at it, and when we recorded it, everybody was like, oh, my God, the narrator's hilarious. I'm like, thank God, good. Yay. Because otherwise it would have just been, the narrator. He's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, probably no offense, most of the audience of that show be like, God, you're killing my boner. Shut up, narrator.
Right, exactly. Exactly. At least this way he was, helping.
Christ almighty. Lord almighty. Okay, so that's awesome. I guess, let me think. God, there's so many. There's so many to talk about. And Negima, I know, was a big one. You were three different characters in that show.
That one was hilarious because when we first started, Funimation didn't have a very large stable of actresses.
Yeah.
So the Japanese originally wanted each one of all of those 30-something girls to be different actresses. And Funimation just didn't have the people. And so I remember them going, okay, we want you to play these 3 girls, but they have to sound very different from each other. And we also would like you to come up with 2 different names. And I was like, huh? And they didn't really tell us why until after the fact. But that's why if you watch like the first disc of Negima, you'll notice that like me and Laura Bailey and Caitlin Glass and a couple of people that play more than one character were each credited differently.
Wait, I didn't realize that. Oh my God.
I think they stopped it after the first disc or two, but in the very first disc, we're all credited differently because they didn't want the Japanese to know that it was the same people.
Actually, I shouldn't say this, but whatever, fuck it. So, there's a certain company out here. I'll keep it vague. There's a certain company that's like, yeah, we're getting tired of hearing the same people over and over. So give us just new people. And, some of the smarter directors that are like, well, we don't want to just pull in either people off the street or people who are inexperienced at this. So sometimes they'll submit auditions for shows where they have to get, like, sometimes, like, just the lead characters approved by such and such company. And they'll just be like, just submit it under a different name. And they won't know and they won't care. And then if they like it, then you'll get it. And then you can just use your real name anyway. What does matter?
Right. Well, and that's the thing is a lot of times the Japanese companies don't understand that, like, this is a very intricate skill. Like the way that we do it, ADR and dubbing in that form is so difficult. Like I know people that have been on Broadway that have auditioned to do ADR and can't.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't compute. And so it's like, I understand that, like, you want us to bring in new people, but here's the problem is that we bring in new people all the time, but out of the 30 new people you bring in, only 2 float.
Yeah. Two can carry a full show, like, as a main character. Yeah, certainly. But well, it's nice, especially when you have like the shows like One Piece and Fairy Tail, where those are great like testing grounds for people because there's
definitely
8 million characters, and I recall like. It would be exciting when I see new faces, and typically I'd see them pop up in those shows first as like, here's a character that's in like an arc or an episode or 2 or whatever, and then, I still remember when like a lot of my friends that were kind of, they kind of came from the same sort of like internet origin point that I did when I was seeing them get, their first parts. And then even sometimes, but then you get guys like Guerrero and Briner who like, they show up and I'm like, yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah, Briner especially, like, I got to do, I think it was episode, I can't remember if it's 51 or 53 of My Hero, but Colleen was out of town, so Caitlin and I kind of tag teamed the directing of that episode, and so I got to work with Briner as a director, and it was the easiest job ever, because I didn't have to do... He's so brilliant. And I finally asked him, I was like, Justin, I don't know your origin story. Like, I don't know where you came from. Like, you just popped up in your little adorableness and you can act like a mofo. And I don't know where you came from. Like, were you a fan dubber? Like, were you on the fan circuit? Like, he's like, oh no, I'm a trained actor. I've been a trained actor for many, many years and just kind of found it. And I'm like, That's so weird because I didn't think that happened anymore.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, when I meet people that are, like, because, I mean, I came from I wasn't on the VAA or anything necessarily, but, like, I came from that kind of origin point or whatever. I knew a lot of those
Right.
guys. And, like, but I remember, like, whenever I'd meet people like Justin who, like, no, I have a real acting background, and, like, when they would go to, here or Texas or New York or Vancouver or wherever, and I'd be like, they're going to be the next big thing, and then, time passes, and then they are.
Yep. Boom. There you go.
Yeah.
That's all it took. But yeah, we've got a good mix, I think, now of like people who come from fandom and people who come from, voiceover that were not necessarily character voiceover actors, but did, political campaigns or whatever. And then they've come over. So we've got a good mix of like a little bit of everybody. And I like that, there's not, I don't know if this is the case everywhere. And I think it started to change a little, which makes me sad. But for us, there's no competition. It's like, if you're the lead in this one, that's great. I'm sure I'll get a lead down the road, or, I'll play your best friend in this show. I'll be your boyfriend in the next show. And, like there's absolutely no competition between people. And I see it more with the younger actors, like the
Yep.
newest group.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot more of that cutthroat kind of, which to me is like ridiculous, because then I seem like the crazy old lady who's sitting on the couch with, Lucy Christian and Tatum going, why are they being so mean to each other?
Yeah.
Like they don't need to be like that. Like, this is okay, but we'll watch it anyway. It's like a telenovela.
Throw some popcorn around.
Right.
But and it's funny because with so many people now, going back to the earlier bit about Negima, that's funny to hear that, because I look at that now and I'm like, God, that would never happen today, where you'd have like,
No.
girls playing 2 or 3 different characters in a single show with that many. It's like, no, you would get, it's a different person for every single one of those characters. That's such a thing in the past now.
Yeah. It's crazy when I think about some of the shows where I was, triple and quadruple cast and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this would never happen now. And I mean, we've grown too. I think Funimation could cast Negima probably 4 times over now.
Oh God, yeah.
But at the time it was like, okay, we'll use who we have.
Yeah. On the multi thing too, is I've never told you this. This has been, I just remembered this story, but when Toonami was starting up again, and this was of course already many years ago now, but I remember when the block for a little while, I think it was FMA Brotherhood, where you were May Chang.
I remember that.
Followed by Dead Man Wonderland, where you were the girl whose name I forget. Followed by Shiro, thank you. Followed by Casher and Sins, where you were the little girl, and I was like, all right, I see what's going on here.
Well, there was a period at Funimation, like when I moved up and I lived up here. There was a period where everybody, like, they didn't have any little girls. They had, Colleen, who could do like the Silky and all this, and they had great people in every realm, but nobody who could do like the little bitty cutesy girls. Mm-hmm. And so I came in and I was like, hey, I've got a cute little voice and I can do this. And they're like, sweet, okay, great, you're going to be the little girl in everything. And I was like, huh? So there was probably a good 3 years at Funimation where I did nothing but either cute or psychotic or murderous little girls, which is awesome. I love them. But as an actor, I was like, you guys know I can do other things, right? Like,
yeah.
So then I felt bad when it was Toonami, and I was like, oh, it's like the Monica sounds like a 5-year-old hour.
Hour and a half to 2 hours, yeah.
Right.
Well, but then when stuff like, I mean, I know this wasn't a runaway hit, but like Burst Angel, I was like, whoa, okay, hello, I didn't know you could do that, which was great.
Right. Then when that stuff, I had to fight it for a while, because like when Michiko and Hachin came out, everybody was really kind of, before they had heard me, and like Bevins and Funimation totally punked the entire like fandom, because they announced the cast list without announcing or releasing any clips of Michiko and Hachin. So of course everybody was livid when they found out that I was playing Michiko, because they'd only ever heard that 2-hour block on Toonami when I'm talking really, really high. So I think everybody was like freaked out, and I had to fight really hard to be like, look, you guys, I do other things. So now that we've got other people that can do the little cutesy stuff, I can be the grown-ass woman. I can be the old lady. I can be like the older sister. I can be all of these things that I didn't get to be before. But I fought it for a while on the internet because people would be so mean. They're like, oh, she only has that one voice. And I'm like, I don't though.
Oh no. I mean, like, no. Honestly, my familiarity with your other stuff actually was what made me happy about. Well, I need to watch Michiko and Hachi, and Bevins will kill me for not having seen it yet.
Oh, it's such a good show.
But I mean, like, having seen Burst Angel, I knew you could pull that off, even just seeing the
Oh,
character,
yeah.
you know. And then even also just from seeing you throughout enough stuff. I mean, because we're getting close to the end here, but I have to talk a little bit about Dragon Ball.
Please, yeah.
But I mean, like, when they announced Kai. And you were taking over for Bulma. I was like, oh my dear God, yes, please. And it's interesting because, having met you a few times, before and after that happened, I was like, oh, Bulma's like technically like lower for her.
Yeah.
But I mean so I think 8 years now since Kai was 2010. I think was when you guys started that.
Yeah, 2010. I started recording in 2009. So yeah, it's almost, we're looking at 8-9 years. So it's crazy to think it's even been that long because it doesn't feel like it, and yet it does. If that makes sense.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, you guys had Kameha Con recently, which was huge. Super's kicking. Bulma's kind of done on Super at the moment, but
I know. I'm so sad.
Yeah,
but at least we've got the movie coming up, so I've got something else to be excited about. Because I was like, oh man, I'm gone for like 36 episodes.
Yeah, but no, I mean, Dragon Ball is. I mean, that's the job that never ends and probably never will for as long as we live.
Right.
And My Hero. I mean, Sue's got a lot, and in the U.S., Sue's got a lot of love. I've picked up on, so
Yeah, she it's been funny to me because like I know like even with the Pops when Funko came out with the Pop, I tried so desperately. I was at a convention that weekend and people were bringing them up to me, and I tried so desperately to find one. And every time I'd find a dealer that had them, they'd sell out, like just gone. I'm like, I'm never gonna get a Suyu Pop. We had to order it on Amazon because like. We went to places out by where we live and there weren't any. I'm like, good Lord. I mean, this is great. I love that she's popular, but I want a Sue Pop.
Oh, Lord. We just need more merch of that show in general, really, is the truth.
Right. I was looking at Hot Topic because, they've got quite a bit of stuff now, and I did end up getting myself a cute little Froppy shirt. But they do have some, but not nearly as much as I would like to see.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that show in particular, that dub is brilliant. Please give my compliments to Colleen and everybody for how good it turns out. And but actually, by the time this interview will be going up, I will have gone to see the movie.
Yay!
Which I've heard is excellent. I hear it's like Die Hard with My Hero characters. So
I haven't actually seen it yet. I get to see it September 25th.
Sweet.
So coming up, I get to see it, and I will be excited to see it. Although I've already seen it because I dubbed it, but I haven't gotten to see what happens. I will. Small spoiler: I don't spend a whole lot of time on screen. I know, horrible movie.
I know.
I'm kidding. But as a result, I don't know exactly what happens in it, so I am very excited to see what's going on.
Yeah. We need another like Froppy filler episode, anime exclusive thing.
Yeah.
I want more of that, please.
I'm all for it.
Well, you have been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for chatting with me and letting me chat with you. That was awesome. Yeah, for sure. Sorry about my yard, guys.
No. Ambiance. Good ambiance. I guess, I mean, anything you want, the generic plugging of social media, any cons you got coming up, any shows you want people to watch, whatever, all the usual stuff,
Yeah, I am. Okay, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter as @Rialisms, RIALISMS. I have a really awesome Facebook group called The Realists, RIALISTS. And they're great. They do all kinds of fun stuff. Gosh, what's coming out? Okay, the My Hero movie's coming out, so you should definitely see that. The Dragon Ball Broly movie's coming out, so you should definitely see that. Golden Kamui is coming back this season. So is Tokyo Ghoul RE and a whole bunch of other stuff. They haven't announced it. But by the time this comes out, they will have announced. But, some index and some fairy tale and some other stuff. Mm-hmm. And then, in January, Genlock from Rooster Teeth is coming out, and I'm super stoked to be a part of that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Cool.
Be sure and check that out. But yeah, thanks for being so supportive, everybody, and I appreciate it. And y'all are awesome. And thank you, Chris, for having me. And Anytime you want to chat, just let me know.
Of course. Awesome. Well, that's going to wrap us up. Ladies and gentlemen, please, in the comments below, leave any and all lovely things you may have to say about Monica on any of her cajillion characters that she voiced throughout the years and the cajillions of shows that she's been in throughout the years. Any favorite moments. Maybe even dig out some obscure characters from some shows that you like from back in the day if you got any. And please go ahead and follow her on Twitter, Instagram. Check her out in Dragon Ball Super Broly coming next year. I hope you all, by this point, have seen My Hero 2 Heroes in theaters. And probably coming soon to Blu-ray at some point. I'm sure it won't be long for that either. And yeah, so thanks, everybody. We'll catch you all in the next one for my next lovely guest for Voiceoctober 2017. And till then, stay frosty. Bye.
Bye.